Christian here. I not only believe that if you lie, you deserve to be unalived, but that you deserve to be mercilessly inflicted with pain forever afterwards, because we have all fallen short of the greatness of God. This is a comment I got in reaction to a video I did asking Christians, why do you trust God? Not why do you believe in God? Not why do you obey God? Just why do you trust Him? And yet, I got so many comments like this. Not that this comment doesn't have anything to do with the video, because I gave an example of why I didn't trust God, and it was the unjust punishment of hell as one of many for something as simple as telling a lie. So he's saying, no, they do deserve it. So this isn't just a troll comment. This is what this person really believes, and you can see their comment history. That's why it's so sad. So before we dive in, I want you just to keep that in mind. We're going to go through comment after comment after comment after comment that was supposed to be Christians having an opportunity to follow biblical advice, to always be ready to have an account for your faith by anyone who asks, and to do so kindly and gently and with patience. And yet, how many do you think didn't answer the question? And then also pay attention, how many answered a different question? As if I had asked, why do you obey God? Because you get a lot of answers about, well, I fear Him, or He's the most powerful, or what else are you going to do? Those aren't reasons for trust. And then some do actually attempt to answer the question. So we're going to go through these pretty much in the order that I got them. There's a few that were really redundant that got left out, but otherwise I grabbed almost every single Christian comment there was. Might cut some for time, but it's a pretty fair representation. So getting back to this first comment, there's really not much to say about it. This is what Christians believe. It's what you have to believe. It sounds silly or extreme when you say it out loud that because someone lies, they deserve to not have life, and then they deserve to be kept alive eternally, consciously for torment, right? Like any normal person truly would say, no, that's not okay. We don't even arrest people for lying. Lying isn't even a crime. Of course, there's some exceptions like perjury, but in general, you can go tell a lie and fear absolutely no retribution, and no Christian is fighting to have that changed. So you're telling me from a human level, we can see that lying, though not very beneficial, should not even be considered a criminal issue. But then on a spiritual side, you think it should lead to death and torture? The only way a human brain can get to thinking like that is through religion. So thank you for not answering the question from the video and showing us even further why we shouldn't trust this God, nor His Bible, nor the people that claim to follow it. So moving on to the next comment here, what choice do we have other than to tap into the better angel of His nature? Which is a poetic way of saying your God has multiple natures then, and a better one implies a worse one. And yet the book that tells you about this God claims that He is perfect, that He's all good, that He's all just. The reason you're even having to make this concession is because in my video I clearly pointed out the issues with His consistency in moral nature. So out of fear, what choice do we have? You're saying we should just tap into or only meditate on the good side of God. And I say you're a coward. You are unwilling because of your own fear to recognize the obvious issues with this God. So again, you can believe He is real. You can believe you need to obey Him because you're concerned for your soul, but you have not shown me why we should trust Him. If anything, you've shown quite the opposite. Next is representative of an answer I did get quite a bit. I trust God because He has come through for me every time and shown Himself to be trustworthy. So there's two parts there. The second one, and shown Himself to be trustworthy, does not explain why we should trust Him. And you're backing up the shows Himself to be trustworthy by the first part, which is that He's come through for you every time. Now, I actually ended the video I made saying, I know there's one thing Christians are going to rely on, one of the only things I perceive that even could be an answer, which would be personal experience. And personal experience fails for a few reasons here. One, this Christian would not accept personal experience from a Hindu or a Muslim to prove that their God is real and or trustworthy. It's a very simple exchange we have. If you will not count their personal experience, I don't need to count your personal experience, because what you're saying is you believe personal experience can be false. You believe when the Muslim or Hindu tells you they have personal experience that proves trustworthiness in their God, you say, no, you didn't. You say you must be confused. You say you must be lying. You say that maybe your brain is playing a trick on you. All of a sudden you can recognize all the biases like confirmation bias. And that's exactly what I see every time. Even the biblical writers wouldn't say that God came through for them every time. Sounds to me more like you're only remembering your wins and not all the misses, which is an easy thing to do. I've probably had 100 fortune cookies in my life. 3 or 4 of them have been really accurate because of chance. And when I think about fortune cookies, I always remember just those. And I'm like, man, those things are really accurate sometimes, kind of spooky. Not really. We're just not considering all the times that your prayer didn't get answered, or that it got answered no, but you counted it as a win because it was actually God teaching you a lesson. I know it may feel unfair not to count your personal experience, but for the reasons I laid out, it simply doesn't matter. Now, to be fair, my question was, Christians, why do you trust God? And here I am arguing your answers. I understand that. This person answered honestly. They trust because they feel that they have perceived that this God has come through for them. I can't take that away from them. I'm just now giving my reaction as to why that answer doesn't move the needle for me. Next, as a Christian here who has no inclination to deconstruct, I will simply say that I can hear your pain, your frustration, your disappointment, and if not yours, then the commenter's anger. I understand it all. God is bigger than we give him credit for. I will be here to hear what you have to say. I can't watch everything, and I can't have 100 discussions, but I will be here. And that's fine. This is a nicer Christian response, but this whole "you're just hurt," even said with a little bit of empathy or compassion, rings really hollow. I am not hurt by a God I don't believe in. I am frustrated about a religion that is real and harmful, and I'm passionate about helping other people who are in the middle of trying to escape it but are getting held down by all of these bad apologetics. But to act like the issue here is I'm just some wounded animal instead of contending with anything that I actually laid out is just silly at this point. You say you'll be here for what I have to say. What I have to say is, why do you trust God? And as a self-proclaimed Christian, you didn't give an answer other than he's bigger than we give him credit for. What are you talking about? Christians give him credit for quite literally everything. I want to know why. You're saying he doesn't get enough credit and I'm just hurt isn't an answer. It's not logical or rational, therefore it can't be explained in those terms. It's faith. So my question was, why do you trust God? And you're saying, I can't logically or rationally tell you why I trust him. You just trust him in faith. Why don't you trust a different God in faith? Whatever you answer there is the answer you probably should have put here. But my guess is that answer is actually really weak. Is he the God of the country you grew up in? Is it the God your parents taught you about? Is it the God of the first holy book that was handed to you? Most likely. Do you not see a problem with that? Again, going back, I think I said 2 Peter before, it's 1 Peter 3:15. It says, be prepared to give an answer. That's not a call to a shrug, which is what you gave. It's a call to account, for which you apparently cannot give. Admitting that your faith isn't logical, that your trust isn't rational, is admitting the thing you're trying to avoid, that this can't be tested, that it can't be measured, that it can't be verified. So your answer is, I don't have an answer. Got it. I know that because we're told to trust God both explicitly and implicitly. You're right. But why do you trust the source that's telling you that? This is the other thing I called out at the end of the video. Many of you are going to just say because the Bible says to. Well, then you just need to take it one step higher. Why then do you trust that the Bible is valid? The problem is being told isn't the same thing as being justified. I was saying, why do you trust God? What's the justification? If what justifies placing ultimate trust in something or someone is because there are words that are written that say to do so, then again, why don't you trust every God of all time? Because they all have words about how they should be trusted. I'm sure there's Christians getting frustrated saying, oh, he's just going to say no to everything. I'm going to say no to every non-good reason. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to show that the trust Christians claim to have in their God is actually just belief, fear, culture, or a bunch of other things that don't equal trust, which is why I started my last video with a definition of trust. I'm not going to take the time to go through that here, but these aren't trust answers so far. I'm not going to go through this whole one, so don't be afraid of how big it is, but I want to show that a lot of Christians replied with something like this. Here's why I trust God as believer, and then bam, a ton of Bible verses. And there's two issues with this again. Everything I've already mentioned, which I won't repeat. All you've done is add a level of complexity. You trust God because you trust the Bible. Fine, why do you trust the Bible? But then secondly, I could just show you how easy it is to say we don't have good reason to trust the Bible. I'll only take your first verse. You say 1 John 1:5, God is light. This is the message we have heard from him and announced to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. So pay attention here. Even if I give to you that you using the Bible as why you trust God is valid, which it isn't, as soon as I show you something like Isaiah 45:7, which claims the opposite of the verse you just listed, where God himself claims, I form the light and I create darkness. I make peace and create evil. Your very God, in just a part of your canon you don't particularly want to cherry pick from, says that darkness belongs to him. And yet you definitely have a verse that say there is no darkness in him. That just doesn't work. That's a contradiction. Contradictions make something untrustworthy. If the Bible's untrustworthy, then the verse you use from it is untrustworthy. And thus, I still don't see why we're trusting this God. And we could do the same with every other verse that you gave. And even if there's not another verse that says the exact opposite, there's a verse that shows the nature of God in something that he does or something that he commands that shows the opposite. Again, just see my first video. Why should we trust a brain that was built by accident? I challenge any scientist here. First, I would just like to point out, again, not an answer to the question. But second, this is just someone who has clearly been fed a lie about evolution so they can preserve their precious little belief in the creation story. It's always this misnomer of created by accident, negatively framing this as best you can. Why? If it's untrue, why do you have to try to misrepresent it? Evolution isn't random chaos all of a sudden spitting out consciousness. It's cumulative selection over billions of years, favoring survival traits. And you know what a pretty good survival trait is? Accurate perception and reasoning. Now, not that everyone uses it, because things like religion can really get in the way. And not to say that our brains are perfect. No, there's a ton of flaws and biases, but they're the best thing we have to determine reality. And even when you're saying, well, why should we trust a brain? You're trusting your brain to distrust my brain, to trust in the brains of men that lived thousands of years ago that wrote down a bunch of contradictory things. People always act like they're elevated, like, oh, I'm above the human consciousness. I'm trusting in faith in a higher supernatural power. No, you're just still using your brain. That's all it is. You're doing your thing and I'm doing my thing. One of us, though, is basing it off of evidence, reason, logic, and critical thinking. The other is my book told me so or my mom told me so. No, that is not an answer. Next one just says, why do you care? Seriously. Again, not an answer, just a deflection meant to stop the conversation. I care because I live in a country that is predominantly Christian, that is passing laws based off of supposedly Christian ideas and values. Because every single day I hear from Christians telling me that I need to put my trust in God, because I'm trying to help people who are doubting or deconstructing and are still hung up on this concept, because I care about truth and I'm willing to follow it wherever it goes. So again, I have plenty of reasons to care. You apparently don't, even though biblically we know you're supposed to. This shouldn't be a hard question, right? Like, that's the other thing. No matter what comment we're looking at today, is it a hard question if there's a real God of the universe that actually cares and is involved and created and answers prayers and is omnipresent and actually lives and dwells in your heart with his spirit, who makes people new creations, who is the only source of truth in the world? Is it an insane question to say, how do you know? Why do you trust him? One wouldn't think so. I know that it is a messy question because I know this God isn't real. So thanks for continuing to prove my point. Then there are some really unhinged ones. I'm just going to show one of those. You can read it for yourself here, but that's not an answer. That's a meltdown. You got slurs, you got conspiracies, but you have zero facts. And what you're displaying doesn't sound anything like moral conviction like I think you're hoping for it to come across. I know what that is. That's fear disguised as righteousness, and it's obvious and it's stupid. If you're not putting your trust in God, then you're putting your trust in something else and making that something else your God. So your God has now become what? I put my trust in God because I have no confidence in man. All I have to do is just look around me and I can see where man is failing me every day. Yeah, At least you can see where man fails because you can really see man and you can judge man based off of his actions. So why then should we not have that same expectation for your perfect God? Because I look around and under your story of having a perfectly powerful and perfectly just God, there's zero excuse for all of these failed men. And this whole first part that is so stupid, I have dealt with it. No, it is a false dichotomy. It is not a real binary option to either trust God or trust and worship something else. And again, the very fact that these men can fail is exactly why we should put our trust in them, in things like reason and logic, and yes, even these men, these people, because we can know when to stop, we can know when to change, we can know when to edit, we can know when to alter. When a scientist lies to us, we can test their claim and see that it was a lie. And then again, lastly, saying you have to trust God as the alternative because you can't trust man is denying the very fact that the God you trust in is because you've put your trust in men. Men that we can go back and see where they've made changes, where they've covered up, where they've lied, where they've abused this for their own power, control, and greed, where they've been contradictory even of themselves, but especially in terms of the whole canon and group. Your preachers, your teachers, your Bible study leaders, these are all men. Authors of the Bible, all men. All you've done is quite literally put your trust in man. You just did it in the wrong ones and with no evidence, and that's kind of my point. There were a lot of these next kind of comments where I really think thought they had something. They thought it was their big mic drop moment, and it's just this false thing like this one. Why do you trust goodness? What an odd question. So your answer is because the Bible told me so, like everybody else is. You're saying the Bible says God equals goodness. So if we reframe it like that, doesn't it seem stupid not to trust goodness? Yeah, it seems stupid not to trust goodness. I'll give you that. But in my video, I laid out a lot of reasons why I don't think God equals goodness. And your overarching claim that he does, that anything he does then is good, is exactly why I say that I don't trust him, because it's not about trust, relationship, sincerity, or being accountable. It has to do with might makes right. So therefore, whatever your God does is good, then sometimes slavery is good and sometimes genocide is good. And I'm sorry, I just don't agree. That kind of moral subjectivity dressed up as moral objectivity is the opposite of trustworthy. It's self-defeating, just like your comment. I know the question is rhetorical, but I'll give it my honest answer. It wasn't rhetorical. Thank you for answering, and thank you for giving your honest one. It doesn't mean I'm going to agree with it, but I believe that this is your honest answer, because the alternative was putting on a braided necktie and taking a quick trip that ends with a sudden stop. From there, it's a matter of lived experience. My life, before putting my trust in the Almighty and following the teachings of Christ, wasn't anything I wanted any part of. My life isn't perfect, but I'm happy with it, and that's enough. And I'm very pleased that you did not take that quick trip. And I'm glad that hope has worked for you. But this is not an answer to why this particular God is trustworthy. It's proof that hope can save a life. But we know that this hope can be found in many, 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 many different forms. You will find this exact same testimony from people of almost every religion. Hell, you can find this same testimony from people of any ideology, some self-help book that completely changed their life. That doesn't make every word in the self-help book true, nor does it make the author God. It means that we as people can attach meaning to things and give them a certain kind of specialness or reverence that allows our brain to work in a way that it wasn't before. And so, yes, I'm very glad that this worked for you. Sometimes religion as a concept, the belief in a higher power or something like that, absolutely can be a catalyst to real change. I'm not denying that. I'm just denying that that's the only way that it could happen. And if it's not the only way it could happen, it's not proof of that particular creator. Again, it just goes back to the personal experience bucket, that if you wouldn't count it for other people, then we can't count it for you. If Allah is not real when a Muslim gets sober, then Yahweh is not real for you. But again, thank you for sharing. Here's another nice one. Again, I always want to include Christians that are sincerely giving a honest answer, and here one is. I'm only going to read the first paragraph because it's really long, but I think it sums everything up. I just wanted to add, I trust God because I came to realize I can't know everything. I understand being open to things because you can't know everything. Just like I can't know if there is some supernatural being out there. I can't know that. I am agnostic to that. So therefore I am open to that. But I wouldn't say just because I can't know that, then there must be one that I must trust in. If you're going to utilize that intellectual humility, then it needs to consistently be applied. If I realize I can't know everything, then I can't claim actual trust in this invisible being that has never shown up, that has a lot of problematic bases for why we should believe in it in the first place. But I cut you off. There's anxiety around every corner and uncertainty of the future. Those are feelings. Those are negative feelings. Trusting in Jesus gave me hope and a peace that goes beyond my own understanding. That whatever may happen, I know that it will be okay, that if I die, I know where I will go one day. You had bad feelings like anxiety and fear, and now you have good feelings because you can believe, which is different than trust, especially when you're doing so blind. Like you said, it's beyond your understanding, but that's not the same thing as what I've asked. Why do you believe that the words you read about what Jesus will do for you are real? Again, this just sums up to the Bible told me so, and I was scared and I didn't like those feelings, and so I just chose to believe it. Choosing to believe is not the same thing as something earning your trust. From here, it's kind of just one cliche after another. Your mind is finite, but Jesus is infinite. God sees things beyond how humans see things. You end this paragraph by saying, ultimately, trusting God gave you peace. And again, I am glad that you have peace. Trusting other gods have given other people peace, but those gods are mutually exclusive in their claims. So someone's wrong, which means, again, we can't use this as an answer. But I'm just wanting people to see this is why people actually believe. Something personal has happened in their life. It was the only thing they were raised with. It was the God of the family they were born into. For whatever reason, they think the Bible is the only book that's holy, that's telling the truth. And then because they had all those prior beliefs, when anything happens in their life, they attribute it to that God. And that's it. And this is religion. But this is not reality. So again, I know that it's going to probably seem lame to keep knocking down personal experience and because the Bible tells me so, but that's all there is. And both of those are so unbelievably flawed and inconsistently applied. And so is there an answer? We'll keep going for a bit. Well, first you need to get to God. So stop pretending that you know everything and how things should be. Just search until you find things. Yes, you will make mistakes, but that is okay. Atheism is giving up because it's too hard to search. So I will just make up stuff because it's easier. Then you will figure out why would you trust God. I'm sorry, what did I make up to make it easier? I made up that I don't believe in God to make my life easier? Or what are you alluding to? Do you realize how hollow these words are? Just search until you find things. Yes, if I were going to be dishonest and I was going to say, you know what? I have one goal, which is to convince myself, so I should just search endlessly until that happens. That's exactly how your brain gets into all the biases that end up convincing you this God is real when he's not. It's called self-deception, and it's your prescription. I gave this God 30 years of my life, but I'm lazy? This answer is lazy. You had a chance from someone who has shown their intellectual honesty and humility. I don't claim to know everything or anywhere near it. I claim to know some simple things, and I think that's what you're referring to is what I pointed out in my first video. Like a God that says he's perfectly just shouldn't also be a God that commands slavery to be okay sometimes. A God that claims that he is perfect maybe doesn't kill innocent children to punish their parents. You know, stuff like that, which of course you don't have an answer for. I'm just lazy and need to keep searching. This is arrogant and silly. A Christian pastor here, not trolling or teetering on deconstruction. So when I converted to Christianity from atheism, I had a lot of frustration and animosity for people of faith. Why? Sorry, we'll read the rest of this, but every Christian that has their "I used to be an atheist" line always says how they hated Christians or had so much animosity towards faith. Most actual atheists don't have that. I have zero problem with Christians. I have problems with liars. I have problems with apologists that prey on people who are in fear. I have a problem with religion when it's used for political gain or control of the people, when it promotes active harm, but I have no problem with believers. Why is that baked into every atheist conversion story? I'll never understand. This is not a common thing. And I don't know you. You very well might have actually had animosity for people people of faith, but most of the time when we see this, that person wasn't per se an atheist. They might have not ever really cared. They might have thought they grew up in the church and people were hypocritical and all of these other things. Again, I can't say for sure for you, but then getting serious about their relationship with God later in life is not the same as moving from atheist to Christian. So this added thing is just always a little bit of a red flag, but let's get to the point. He says, and your points in the video are totally valid. If you actually thought all my points were totally valid, you would not also believe in God. Faith in God is preposterous and counterintuitive in many ways. And yet, there are so many people who still persist in the faith. A lot of people doing something that doesn't make sense doesn't make it all of a sudden make sense. Again, you think Allah and Islam are false, and yet 2 billion people persist in that faith. So what? I'm a theological determinist. I believe all things are predestined for a purpose, which also means you believe that a bunch of people were born simply to suffer in this world and then go to hell for a purpose, but that's not for them, which would make the creator of that pretty untrustworthy. Then you say, I believe God is sovereign and he has the freedom to do whatever he chooses. I choose not to judge God according to my human perception, and yep, I still trust him. So what I heard there was, for some reason, you used to hate Christians, then you converted, you understand that faith is preposterous, you don't believe in free will, which takes away all the excuses for the problems of suffering, evil, and hell. But because this God can do whatever he wants in his sovereignty, you're just going to bend the knee. And that all checks out, by the way, biblically. But you choosing not to judge God is false. You did choose to judge God, and you judged that he was worthy of your worship, and you judged that he was worthy of your trust, as you say here. So you're willing to judge God, just not accurately, and then you're also not able to provide the actual answer for why you trust him. If the actual answer is, well, he just is, then again, this is obedience, this is belief, but this is not trust. This next one is also personal experience, but it shows us another reason why it's faulty. So she says, I trust in God because of personal experience, just flat out saying it. I've had claircognizant experiences where I heard a voice which literally got me out of an abduction situation. I've had other times when I heard something clear as day in my spirit during worship or a breakdown, and then a day or so later, a random person at church would say, I know this is random, but the Holy Spirit wants you to know blank, and it would be the exact phrase or direction I was told. Then, when my astrological chart nailed my abusive ex and pregnancy down to the exact month, I could no longer deny there is a creator and plan for everyone's life. My trust in God evolved to be outside of the church, but the trust in a divine mind has never faded. Well, my video was, why do you trust the Christian God? And so you're not exactly answering that. You're saying some higher power that is personal and still involved and has a plan. And if you want to believe in that, that's fine, but you haven't provided any evidence for why we should trust it. And I'm going to kind of just use your answers here as an example to all the Christians who said they trust because of personal experience. In your same breath, you're talking about claircognizant experiences, feelings during worship, supposed prophecies, and astrology. Well, here's the deal. In the Christian world, 2 of these are banned by God. So it's definitely not the God of the Bible doing this for you. So if you were one of the Christians whose reply to this video was personal experience, what do you have to say to this believer in their God when they say that because their star chart aligned, they can trust that God is real? You'd say coincidence. You'd say confirmation bias. You'd say you're only remembering the wins and all of the things that we would, of course, say to you. This was just a great example of that. I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's on the screen so you can see that I'm not exaggerating anything, but this was, again, a representation of so many comments. I'm realizing we're not going to have to go through as many because so many are so similar. But this person says because this God keeps his promises, because he can look around at the world and say, well, yes, there must be a God, which that's not evident either. Tons of good arguments against that. And then it's the same leap of logic that we see in so many Christian testimonies. I saw evidence of a God, and then I narrowed it down to Jesus Christ, and that's where I placed my faith and trust. And he's given all of the same examples. 500 others saw his resurrection, which actually isn't even the claim. Saw the resurrected Jesus. There's not even a claim that 500 people saw him resurrect, just that they saw someone afterwards that they thought was Jesus. And again, that's only one claim. One guy says, hey, there's 500 accounts. Whenever someone uses that as evidence, and thank you, you actually did try to provide evidence of why you trust that Jesus is the God, because the accounts of Jesus, insofar as you have read them, are compelling. But you've also shown that you have just been led down an apologetics train that has been debunked 1,000 times, and you've had no interest in hearing the other side. Because just like it or not, in terms of how evidence goes, one person's claim of 500 people's claim does not equal 500 claims. So if you're the kind of person that acts like it does, we can know then what you've been unwilling to contend with or how dishonest you are willing to be. This is not evidence, or if you want to call it evidence, it's horrific evidence. Here's one of those things that makes you go, why do atheists only make videos attacking theism, especially Christianity? Why don't they ever talk from the pro position about atheism? Oh, you can't. Because atheism at its core is just not believing in gods. There's nothing else there to promote. So instead, the content is defined by what it's against. Theism. That's why almost all atheist content ends up attacking religious belief rather than explaining what atheism is. No, it's because you don't need to explain what atheism is more than once. But there's a billion Christian claims out there that can be debunked. You're half right here. You're saying a couple of things. Atheism at its core is just not believing in gods. There's nothing else there to promote. Exactly. We make no prescriptions. We have no doctrines. We're not even a we. So you really expect a positive side of that, a pro position? I'm not even pro atheist. I'm pro truth. And one aspect of accordance with reality best that we can tell is that particular God concepts that have been claimed have also been falsified, and so I won't believe them. Thus, atheism, but not because I believe in atheism, but because I care about truth, and that seems to be the truth. People always act like there's some win with this, like you're just negative, you're just always criticizing, you have nothing positive to build. But it's kind of like saying that surgeons are so ridiculous because they're always just focused on repairing broken things. They never build new bones. What a silly attack that would be. And it's exactly as silly as this for exactly the same reason. Also, again, just a deflection and someone not being able to have an actual answer. Because we don't have a fucking choice. Trusting God doesn't mean that we think he will do whatever we want him to do for us. It means that we know he will do whatever he sees fit. That's not trust. That's fear. That's obedience. It's not trust. Jesus definitely does exist. I was an atheist and I was being attacked by demons. I never believed in God and he delivered me from demons. Again, personal experience, but a twist here. And a little logic and rationality can help. Can you tell me, why do you think demons attacked you? If you were an atheist, your soul is the devil's, then you're going to hell. You're not promoting this religion. Tell me why the devil would waste any resources on you. And again, most Christians would agree with me. Most Christians would say that it's the closer you get to God, the more good you're doing for his kingdom. That is when the attacks of the spiritual enemy come. The Bible says that Satan stalks around like a roaring lion looking for who he can devour. You're already devoured, but now you're not. Now you're one less soul for the devil and one more in perfect paradise. Why would he do that? I'm a dumb mortal creature and I figured out that motivation doesn't make sense. You don't think that an entity that's thousands of years old with divine power doesn't think that's a bad plan? I do believe you went through something horrible, something terrifying, and I'm glad that you got relief from it. But what you experienced, that sense of being attacked, feeling a dark presence, and having that relieved after invoking a magical belief that supposedly you didn't even have, is not evidence that demons are real or Jesus is real. It proves that belief can radically change perception and emotions. Again, when someone from a different faith system feels they have a demon, because lots of religions do, and they invoke some ritual spell or prayer and all of a sudden they feel better, do you now believe in their God and their demons? I bet not. Because he said to. It's as simple as that. I don't need a reason outside of scripture. He remains faithful when we are faithless. No evidence of him remaining faithful. In fact, lots of evidence in the Bible of him not remaining faithful when the people lose their faith. So again, just another incorrect statement and another admission that it's because you are told to. You know why I don't trust my best friend? because he just told me to. You know that's a bad answer, and yet it's the answer for the most important thing you could ever put your trust in. That makes no sense. This is the last one of this kind that I'll read because some of these are starting to get redundant, but I know you believe God is some absurd fairy tale and Christians are delusional. If it's absurd for Christians to believe this, then it's 10 times as absurd for you to seriously care about it, isn't it? No, and I'll explain in a second. It's like being deeply concerned that a 2-year-old takes the idea of Santa seriously for a few days in December. That's if you really believe it's absurd. Would you be concerned if a 35-year-old seriously still believed in Santa for a few days in December? Would you think maybe something was wrong? What if he started basing his life around it? What if the job he got and how he spent his money and how he spent his time and how he voted all was because of this belief he had in Santa, when you know there's no good reason to continue to believe in Santa? What if you had been like him and you believed in Santa till you were 35 and then you woke up and you realized, man, Santa's not real, there's no good reason to believe in him, and the belief in him can be harmful for myself or others. Even though you no longer believe in Santa, would it be 10 times more absurd than that initial belief in Santa to go and then try to help people that still did? If you're going to make comparisons, make them apt. This was a false analogy and a false attack and really silly because it's been covered 1,000 times before. And also not an answer to my question. Tons like this because God is real. That's not an answer. I know I said I was done with this kind, but this one's extra funny. Why do you spend literally all your time thinking about something you don't believe in? Really curious. This is not all my time. This is 2 to 3 videos a week. I have a whole beautiful full life. I have a whole nother channel I'm doing now that has nothing to do with God. My time with my family has nothing to do with God. My time with my friends has nothing to do with God. My full-time job has nothing to do with God. The rest of my hobbies like reading and hiking and photography have nothing to do with God. But I like to make like 40 to 90 minutes of content on a weekly basis that I know helps people. I'm willing to answer questions. Why aren't you? This is just another stupid deflection. The next one says, sir, I don't know if you think Christians are in some type of forest in the middle of the Amazon eating monkeys and squirrels because we think God said so, but your reality is way off for the average Christians. We live a very normal life. I trust in God because I don't trust in you. This is a silly comment. Tell me what I said at all that alludes to you thinking I think this about Christians. If you're talking about my critiques of the biblical God and many of the things that happened in biblical times, you comparing that to some tribe in the middle of the Amazon is your comparison, not mine. And it's also the predecessors of your faith. So not giving much good reason to trust God. Especially your last line, you trust in God because you don't trust in me? You don't have to trust in me, but that doesn't mean you trust in God. That's maybe the worst answer yet. Congratulations. And you know what? If your foot was stuck in some train track and I was there and you had the option to ask me to help pull it out or pray to God, I guarantee you would trust me over your God. Every single time. Think about that. This one just says, because I know he is real. Not an answer. I assume you're asking this question in good faith rather than to lure believers to your video. I trust God mainly because of the fact that I exist. I literally cannot wrap my head around existing here if there is no creator. Trust me, I have tried being atheist. It only leads me to nihilism and a very dark road. You take an extremely literal interpretation of the Bible. You are also very smart and knowledgeable. It's hard to respond to anyone on the barrage of points you make in this video. I think it would be more valuable if you could slow down a little bit. The bombardment feels disingenuous. I think your points and questions are worth considering, but it comes off as, see, you're literally insane to believe any of this. That's not true, and I think you know that. I wish you peace in this life. It's a nice comment. Thank you for some compliments, but here's a few problems. The bombardment is not disingenuous. The bombardment was, first of all, the opposite. It was like the smallest collection of examples one could ever do. That video was not that long. I could go on for days about all the reasons we actually cannot trust the God of the Bible. Instead, I made a 28-minute video, and not even all of that are the reasons I don't trust, maybe only half of it. So I gave 14 minutes. And if that made you feel, if the 14 minutes of facts I gave straight from the Bible made you feel like any Christian response after that would literally sound insane, maybe think about that. Maybe it points to how lacking an answer is, like, because I exist and because I can't imagine being here without a creator. First of all, that still doesn't get you to Jesus Christ or Yahweh. Second of all, it's just based off a negative feeling that you don't like. That doesn't create truth, and it especially then doesn't just lead to trust automatically. And the last thing I'll say is being accused of taking the Bible extremely literally Come on. The question is, why do you trust in God? And as we can see, one of the biggest answers from believers is because the Bible tells me to. To what? Literally trust in God. So yes, if believers are going to say the Bible tells them to literally trust in God, I should take that Bible claim literally, as well as some of the things that are supposed to be historical. I'm not talking about allegory. I'm not talking about the poetry. I understand the genre differences in the Bible. Every example I brought up in my last video, both Old and New Testament, were things that the Bible meant literally, meant to be taken literally. So don't smuggle that in like I'm some kind of cherry picker who is just abusing verses to make my point. No. And if the Bible's not to be taken literally at all, then all these believers saying that's why they literally put their trust in God need to stop. So again, thank you for the nice words, but this is not an answer. This one just says, shut up, Ginger. Awesome. I bet God is so proud. But don't worry, he won't send any bears after you because you didn't actually make fun of the fact I have no hair. Just the hair that I do have, its color. Really cool. You're so cool. This one says, because I exist. Why do I trust in God? Because he commanded me to. It's not an option. Then it's not trust. Thanks for proving my point. Because it's the only religion I know that works. Because you've tried them all. I doubt you've even tried two. I bet you've tried one, the one you were born into, and you looked around at the reality of the others that you don't believe in and said, doesn't work, even though it's based off the same thing you believe in for the same reasons. I know that many Christians are going to say nothing would have appeased you, but it's not my fault that all of the answers I knew that were coming wouldn't appease me, and that's all we got. That's what happened. That doesn't mean I'm not actually open. It means I have already been open to these answers previously. I have contended with them, and I know why they fail. That is still being intellectually honest. I don't need to purposely believe in things that are untrue to prove to you I have an open mind. That's not how truth works either. And yet I guarantee that's what I'll be getting accused of. The second reason that I did this video was obvious. It was for the inevitable answers that I would get, the only ones that I could get, and to show them for the issues that they have, to show them for the inconsistencies that they have, to show them why they wouldn't work as an answer from another religious person of a different religion to you, to the believer, to try to get it into your head why yours don't work for us, and mainly to take the pressure off and give some evidence of reality to the people in the in-between, doubting and deconstructing and on the road to deconversion that are still so caught up in everyone's personal experience and what the Bible says. But over and over and over and over again, I hope that you can just see those fail. And it might not feel fair. You might want your anecdotal experience to count as evidence, but it just doesn't. You might really think that the Bible is special, that it's different and thus should be treated different and should have a different standard, and we should be able to believe it and use it as evidence, but you can't. Not when it's as faulty as it is, and not when you deny every other holy scripture that has ever been. Until you can account and contend with those things, we just can't care about this as evidence. And some of you did try to provide real evidence outside of the Bible and outside of personal experience, but it didn't equal trust, just belief. Just fear, just obedience, just I don't know what else to do, just we'll look at the trees. Sorry, the simplest of questions. Why should we trust the God that you tell me over and over we should? And you can't answer it. That's it. I'll see you Tuesday with a new video. If you haven't checked out the new channel Sharing Fire, please do so. I'll see you Tuesday. And until then, keep thinking. I wanted to personally thank my top tiers of support, my Iconoclast, Ann, Boris, Grant, GVI, Jimmy Joe, Kiboga, yes, the Kiboga, Matthew, Perry, and Sean. My humanist heroes, Chris, Christian, Craig, James, Jared, Christy, and Matthew. My atheist advocates, Ad Guitar, Caleb, Dakota, Dan, Drew, Jeff, Jeffrey, Jeremy, Jugs, Julie, Malcolm, Paul, Sparky, and Thomas, as well as all of my secular scholar patrons.